Welcome to the History Stories podcast. We're kicking off a historic road trip today, heading straight into one of history's most captivating legends, Atlantis.
That's right.
Now, you've asked us to really dig into the original account, so forget the movies and comics for a bit. We're going straight to the history books and uncovered sources.
Specifically Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher. His writings are where it all begins, really.
Exactly. Our mission on this trip is to unpack that original story. What did Plato actually say?
And then explore why this tale, just keeps sticking around. Why has it fascinated people for literally millennia?
We'll look at the story itself, the theories that popped up later, what the evidence actually says or doesn't say.
Yeah, and ultimately what this whole enduring legend might tell us about ourselves. You wanted knowledge, quick but thorough, and that's the plan. Some surprising facts, hopefully a clear picture.
Okay, so let's get started. Where do we begin? Athens.
Yep. Ancient Athens, around 300 to 60 BCE. That's when Plato wrote his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias.
And these dialogues, they're not just straightforward history, are they? They're philosophical conversations.
Precisely. Plato used stories and dialogues to explore big ideas about politics, justice, the ideal society. And Atlantis becomes a major player in that conversation.
But here's the kicker, right? He doesn't claim he made it up.
No, not at all. He presents it as this ancient story passed down through generations. It's quite a lineage.
So Plato's great-grandfather, Critias, he supposedly heard it from his grandfather.
Who in turn supposedly heard it from Solon, the famous Athenian lawmaker and statesman.
Okay, Solon, and where did he supposedly get it?
From Egyptian priests. During a trip to Egypt to the city of Sais, these priests, they were seen as keepers of incredibly ancient knowledge.
Right, so you've got this chain, Egyptian priest to Solon, Solon to Critias' grandfather, then to Critias himself, and finally Plato writing it down.
Exactly. It gives the story this immediate veneer of, ancient authenticity. Whether that's historical accurate is another question, but that's how Plato frames it.
So what did these priests allegedly tell Solon? What was Atlantis?
Well, they described this incredibly powerful island empire, and its location was key.
Not in the Mediterranean.
No, beyond the Pillars of Hercules. That's the Strait of Gibraltar.
So out in the Atlantic Ocean.
Way out. A vast island kingdom in the Atlantic. And wasn't some minor place.
Plato's description sounds, well, amazing.
It really is a marvel of engineering, immense wealth. He talks about these concentric rings of land and water like circular moats and islands.
Connected by canals and bridges.
Yeah, forming this huge, sophisticated capital city. Advanced technology for the time, grand temples.
Including one to Poseidon, the sea god, right? Covered in precious metals.
That's the one. Adorned with gold, silver, and this other mysterious metal. Orichalcum.
Orichalcum.
Yeah.
We definitely need to circle back to that one. What else did they have?
A massive navy, huge army, vast resources. They supposedly ruled over parts of Libya, North Africa, and even parts of Europe. A true superpower.
Okay, so this amazing, powerful civilization, what happened? Because obviously it's not around now.
Right. Well, according to the story, things went south, morally speaking.
The classic hubris element.
Exactly. This happens supposedly about 9,000 years before Solon's time. So we're talking around 9600 BCE.
Wait, 9600 BCE? That's incredibly ancient, like Mesolithic period ancient.
It's a huge sticking point, yeah.
Yeah.
Long before the kind of complex metalworking civilization Plato describes is thought to have existed, but that's the number he gives.
So this super ancient, super advanced civilization gets arrogant.
Filled with greed and hubris, yeah. And they launched this imperialistic war, their target, Athens and its allies.
And how does Athens fare in this story, Plato being Athenian and all?
Predictably, Athens is portrayed as the ideal virtuous state. Small, maybe, but morally pure. They heroically resist the massive Atlantean invasion.
And they win.
According to Plato, yes. Prehistoric Athens defeats the Atlantean superpower. It's a bit of a David and Goliath story, pitting this idealized Athens against the corrupt Atlantis.
You can definitely see the philosophical angle there, contrasting the ideal state with the flawed one.
Absolutely. But the story doesn't quite end there. The gods get involved.
Divine retribution for the hubris.
You got it. Zeus and the other gods decide Atlantis has gone too far. Punishment is swift and total.
How total?
Violent earthquakes, massive floods, and in a single catastrophic day and night, the entire island of Atlantis sinks beneath the waves.
Wow. Just gone, vanished forever.
Vanished. Wiped off the map. End of story. Well, Plato's story anyway.
So it's a cautionary tale, right? About power, corruption, empires rising and falling.
Definitely. And divine anger.
Yeah.
But the big question that hangs over it all, the reason we're still talking about
Was it real? Or was it just a story Plato made up to make a philosophical point?
exactly. History or allegory. That ambiguity is the engine driving the whole Atlantis mystery.
It makes sense why it's stuck around. So why did it matter so much, both then and now? Plato's intent seems pretty clear using it philosophically.
Right. Contrasting that decadent, ambitious Atlantis with his idealized vision of Athens, it was a powerful narrative tool for his philosophical arguments.
But how did people react back then? Did everyone just accept it as a fable?
Interestingly, yeah, mostly.
Hmm.
Even Plato's own student, Aristotle, who was
Ah.
brilliant, he pretty much dismissed it as fiction, a philosophical invention.
So no ancient Indiana Joneses heading out into the Atlantic to look for it.
Doesn't seem like it. For centuries, it was mostly treated as one of Plato's illustrative myths, not literal history.
But it didn't disappear entirely.
No, the story lingered.
Yeah.
Then, during the Renaissance, you get this rediscovery of classical texts, Plato included.
And people started debating it again, real or not real.
Kinda, yeah. And then Francis Bacon, in the 17th century, writes his own book, New Atlantis.
Which wasn't about the old Atlantis, was it? It was a utopian thing.
Exactly. It was fiction, a commentary on society. But using that name, Atlantis, it helped keep the idea alive, associating it with this notion of an ideal lost world.
But the real shift, the point where Atlantis becomes this massive popular obsession as a real lost civilization, became later.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
much later. 1882, a guy named Ignatius Donnelly.
Donnelly, I've heard that name. Atlantis, the antediluvian world.
That's the one. This book was a huge game changer. Donnelly wasn't a mainstream academic. He was a former politician, kind of an eccentric thinker.
And what was his big idea?
He argued very passionately that Plato's Atlantis was absolutely real, literal history. And not just real, but it was the source, the mother civilization of all other ancient cultures, Egyptians, Mayans, Incas.
Whoa, so he thought they all descended from Atlanteans.
Pretty much. He looked for similarities across cultures, pyramids, flood myths, language links, stuff like that, and used them as proof of this common Atlantean origin.
How did actual scholars react to that?
Academically, it was largely dismissed. His methods were seen as cherry-picking evidence, making huge leaps in logic. But the public, they loved it.
The book was bestseller.
Massive. It tapped into something, this fascination with lost golden ages, ancient mysteries. Donnelly basically cemented the idea of Atlantis as a real historical place in the popular imagination.
And that legacy is still with us, isn't it?
Totally. So today, Atlantis exists on multiple levels. For scholars, it's mostly allegory, maybe a distorted memory at best.
So for many people, and definitely in pop culture, it's the ultimate lost world, the template for any sunken advanced city.
Fringe theories, New Age beliefs, blockbuster movies.
Hmm.
It's everywhere. All tracing back, in a way, to Donnelly popularizing that literal interpretation.
Okay, so building on that, let's unpack some of the main theories people have proposed over the years. What's the spectrum look like?
Well, top of the list, scholarly consensus-wise, is still the philosophical allegory.
Right, Plato using it as a narrative device.
Exactly. The evidence points that way. Plato's known use of myths, the fact no other ancient writers mention it, Aristotle calling it fiction.
And that impossible timeline, the 9600 BCE date.
Yeah, that's a big one. It just doesn't fit with archaeology. So allegory makes the most sense from a historical and literary perspective.
But people want a real Atlantis. So what's the most popular historical explanation?
That would probably be the Minoan connection. The civilization on Crete.
And the eruption of Thera, modern Santorini, around 1600 BCE.
That's the one. This theory got popular around the mid-20th century. You look at the Minoans' advanced island civilization, powerful navy, sophisticated art and architecture.
And they suffered a major catastrophe linked to the sea. The Thera eruption was enormous.
Huge. It definitely caused tsunamis, buried the city of Akrotiri on Thera itself under ash. So the idea is maybe Plato's story is a garbled memory of that event.
An advanced island civilization destroyed suddenly by the sea. It sounds plausible on the surface.
It does. There are appealing similarities,
Right.
but there are also big problems.
Like?
Well, the dates are way off.
Yeah.
1600 BCE versus Plato's 9600 BCE. Even if you try to argue Plato meant months, not years or something, the text says 9,000 years pretty clearly.
Okay, dates are a problem. What else?
Location. Crete and Santorini are in the Mediterranean. Plato explicitly says Atlantis was beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the Atlantic.
Right, big difference.
And the scale. Plato describes a massive island, potentially continent-sized, sinking entirely. The Thera eruption, while devastating, didn't sink Crete.
And the war with Athens, does that fit the Minoan timeline?
Not really. It doesn't align with what we know about Minoan history or their interactions with mainland Greece at that time.
Huh.
So the Minoan theory, it's intriguing. Maybe there's an echo there, but it doesn't quite match Plato's details.
So if not the Minoans, where else have people looked? You mentioned that grab bag earlier.
Oh, yeah. It's like Atlantis location bingo sometimes.
Yeah.
People have proposed sites all over the place.
Like where?
In the Atlantic, you get theories about the Azores, the Canary Islands, Bimini Road, and the Bahamas.
Bimini Road, those underwater rock formations.
Yep. Often claimed as remnants, though geologists generally say they're natural formations.
Mm-hmm.
Then in the Mediterranean, you get Sardinia, Malta, Cyprus, even Troy suggested.
Troy. How does that fit?
It doesn't really. These theories often rely on very loose interpretations. And it goes further afield too. Ireland, Spain, Doggerland, which is now under the North Sea, even Antarctica or South America.
Antarctica.
Seriously.
Seriously. The evidence for these is usually, let's say, thin, often based on interpreting myths, questionable artifacts, geological anomalies, or supposed linguistic links. Almost never solid archaeological proof matching Plato's description.
Sounds like a lot of wishful thinking driving those searches.
Often, yes. And then, of course, you step into the really fringe stuff.
The really out there theories.
Yeah. Where Atlantis wasn't just advanced for its time, but hyper-advanced. We're talking crystals, flying machines, psychic powers.
Maybe aliens involved?
Yeah.
Or links to other lost continents like Lemuria or Mu.
Exactly. That whole cluster of ideas. The evidence here shifts completely away from archaeology or geology.
Oh, what? Psychic readings. Esoteric texts. Pretty much. Channeled information, interpretations of ancient myths as literal technological records. It's fascinating from a cultural perspective how the myth evolves, but it's got no basis in conventional science or history.
So a whole spectrum from plausible allegory to, well, space crystals.
That about sums it up. But regardless of the reality, the idea of Atlantis has had this incredible staying power.
Absolutely. The name itself, Atlantis. It's like shorthand now, isn't it?
Totally. Any lost paradise, any advanced sunken city, we call it an Atlantis, it's entered the language.
And Donnelly's book, even though academics shrugged it off, it really set the stage for the popular hunt for a real Atlantis.
It absolutely did. It shifted the public perception from Plato's story to lost historical place. That quest narrative is still powerful.
And then it got picked up by New Age movements, too.
Big time. Especially in the 20th century. Atlantis became associated with ancient wisdom, spiritual enlightenment, forgotten powers. Figures like Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, gave detailed psychic readings about Atlantean life and technology.
Right, I remember hearing about KC, and pop culture just went to town with it.
Oh, completely. It's a staple. Books like Jules Verne, Disney's animated Atlantis, Aquaman's Kingdom, Stargate Atlantis.
Video games, too. Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, parts of Assassin's Creed. It's everywhere.
It's the perfect trope. Mystery, adventure, lost technology, a sunken world. It ticks all the boxes.
And people are still actively looking for it, right? Sending out expeditions.
They are. You still see headlines periodically, possible Atlantis found, usually tied to some underwater sonar readings or unusual formations somewhere like the Azores or off the coast of Spain or in the Caribbean.
But nothing concrete has ever panned out.
Not in a way that satisfies mainstream archaeology or geology and matches Plato's account. Lots of enthusiasm, sometimes bordering on pseudo-archaeology, but no definitive proof of Plato's Atlantis.
Yeah.
The dream persists, though.
It really does. Okay, before we wrap up, let's touch on some of those fascinating little details, the deep cuts from Plato's text that fuel the mystery, that metal orichalcum.
Ah, yes. Orichalcum. Second only to gold, flashes with red light. How was it?
Theories.
Plenty. Maybe a natural gold-copper alloy like tumbaga, found in South America. Some suggest amber. Some think maybe brass or a coppery zinc alloy, though that might be anachronistic.
Or maybe Plato just made it up. For effect.
Entirely possible.
Yeah.
A poetic detail to enhance Atlantis' exotic wealth and mystique. We just don't know for sure.
And the sheer size Plato describes. The plain, the city.
It's enormous. A plain roughly 340 by 230 miles. A capital city with huge concentric rings spanning miles. Finding geological evidence for something that vast sinking without a trace. It's a major challenge for literal interpretation.
Makes the allegory theory look more plausible again.
It does. And then there's that timeline. We keep coming back to it.
9,000 years before Solon. 9600 BCE.
Right in the Mesolithic. It just doesn't fit the description of a complex Bronze Age-style civilization with massive cities, organized armies, metalwork. Some try to argue the number was mistranslated, maybe 900 years instead.
But the text says 9,000.
Explicitly. Trying to change it feels like trying to force the story to fit a preconceived historical theory.
Okay, what about the Egyptian connection? Plato says Solon heard it from Egyptian priests.
Yeah, he presents Egypt as the source of this ancient wisdom.
But have archaeologists or historians found any Egyptian records that mention Atlantis? Or a war with Athens back then?
Nope. Absolutely nothing. No Egyptian texts corroborate Plato's story, which makes you suspect Plato might have been using Egypt's reputation for ancient knowledge to give his own story more weight.
A bit of narrative borrowing, perhaps?
Hmm.
What else? The Critias dialogue? It's unfinished, right?
Bizarrely, yes. It's the dialogue with the most detailed description of Atlantis, and it just stops. Mid-sentence, basically. Right as Zeus is about to pronounce judgment on the Atlanteans.
We never get the ending from Plato. Why?
Nobody knows for sure. Did he die? Did he lose interest? Did he realize he'd written himself into a corner? It's another layer of mystery.
Wow. And there was that mention of an opposite continent.
A brief line in Timaeus, yeah. Beyond Atlantis, there was supposedly a larger continent.
Cue theories about Plato knowing about the Americas.
Cue those theories, yes. But it's incredibly unlikely. It probably just refers poetically to the unknown lands believed to exist beyond the known world.
And one last little detail, the word island itself, Nisos in Greek.
Right. Well, it usually means island. It could occasionally refer to a peninsula or even just a coastal region. Some theories trying to place Atlantis somewhere like Spain have seized on that ambiguity.
So even the basic geography is slightly open to interpretation.
It highlights how interpreting an ancient text across millennia is complex. So, as our historic road trip draws to a close, it's clear Atlantis isn't just one thing.
It's philosophy, it's maybe distorted history, it's definitely centuries of imagination layered on top.
Exactly. The chances of finding a literal, continent-sized Atlantis, exactly as Plato described, seem, well, slim to none based on current evidence.
But the myth itself, its power, that tells us so much about our fascination with lost golden ages, the fear of societal collapse, the dangers of hubris.
And the enduring search for meaning and origins.
We really hope this journey into the history books and the uncovered sources has sparked some thoughts for you, maybe given you a clearer picture of where the Atlantis story actually comes from.
What stands out most to you? Is it the philosophical depth? The tantalizing hint of a real lost world? Or just the incredible imaginative power it holds?
This road trip is really just a starting point. You could even go read Plato's Timaeus and Critias yourself, see what you make of it directly.
The mystery definitely continues to beckon.
Absolutely. Join us next time on the History Stories podcast for another historic road trip into the past.